Yeah, and we are live, it seems.
Yep.
Nice. Yeah, 2021 is upon us, I guess. 19th of January, and we only managed to do the first episode. I'm not sure if that's actually good or bad, but yeah. Anyways, we are back. I think that's the good thing, and we actually both back. So that's I think the second good news of the day. So that said, welcome y'all to another freshly squeezed episode of PKs on Air. We're kind of trying to continue that. What kind of became a tradition, at least in the last weeks and month. And yeah, gonna be back with hopefully a couple of exciting episodes in the next weeks. I think weeks and month. So Dominique,
Definitely.
how are you?
I'm good. I had some pretty relaxing weeks. So between Christmas and New Year's Eve, took some time, just of course staying at home, like everybody, I guess.
Yeah.
Which was quite good. I think just had a lot of sleep, which I missed during the last weeks of the year. So everything is quite good. Yeah, it took some time, to be honest, to come back to the regular mode, I would say. So being back in the office and try to collect. So my first day was like, okay, how did I manage my work? So
what am I doing here?
Yeah, definitely. So, but yeah, I'm super happy that we are back live today, and excited in our next episodes. I think our content calendar looks quite exciting.
Yeah, it does indeed. It does indeed. Yeah, I mean, so are you a person that needs to take some days to just slow down? I mean, I understand picking back up the speed is one thing, right? But are you also someone that kind of needs, let's say, I think there's people say you need a week to slow down. Are you kind of the same, or are you like, meh?
Definitely, I need at least 1 week to calm down, because sometimes my brain feels like thinking like on 5 different strings at the same time. So it was like the first days was like waking up early in the morning and like, okay, what are we doing now? Okay, and going to the kitchen and having coffee, and it was like, and then my boyfriend was like, okay, I think you can calm down because we have basically nothing to do during the next 2 weeks.
Feels weird, doesn't it?
So yeah, it's always like, and then it's like every 5 minutes, like, maybe I forgot something to write, any kind of messages or whatever. Have I done that? Have I done this one? And yeah, it always takes time, but I think same for you, right? Or how is it for you?
Yeah, pretty much the same. Yeah, I mean, it was quite packed, I guess, straight until Christmas, and then well, yeah, I kind of had still like a relatively full inbox, which I kind of tried to sort out between the days. So for me, it was really kind of the week after New Year's, where I kind of just literally did not that much, let's put it that way. But yeah, I'm kind of the same. I mean, constantly wired, doing too many things at once. So I guess that's pretty much that. So I kind of also needed a bit of this. I think what does it is the fact that like when there's constantly kind of emails and whatnot coming in, then you're somewhat oftentimes inclined to just reply, and then that doesn't happen between the days, which I guess is a good thing. So then slowing down is a bit easier. At least that's how I always feel, because as you said, like sometimes you're like, well, maybe I missed something or missed this or missed that. So that's very much true. Yeah. Did you manage to read any books in between the days then, or is that still happening?
I knew that question would come up, but not surprising, I would say. The answer is no.
Fair enough.
Just nothing. I was listening to a lot of podcasts during Christmas and New Year's Eve, but I haven't touched on any books. So I moved them from the one desk to the other, but I didn't manage to.
At least, right? So they kind of like, I was gonna say from one shelf to the other, but yeah. So are you a podcast person then?
I wouldn't say entirely, but during that days, I was so exhausted from the ending of 2020 that it felt too hard to consume like information via reading, and I was like, okay, I need something super, super easy to consume stuff. And then I started TV shows and was like, okay, I cannot just waste my time with crazy stuff. And then and then I started thinking about, okay, maybe I should try to listen to some podcasts, because it's just easy to consume. That's the thing for me there. I love reading or listening to podcasts when going to the office. So on my way to the office, that's fine. But I'm not that 100% focused there, because it's more like having it or listening to podcasts while doing something else, or while doing sports, or I don't know, tidying up the room or anything like this. But during that time, I really enjoyed it, because it was just easier for my brain to work with that information.
Very true. Very true. Yeah. So for those that now are expecting us to talk about Clubhouse, that's not gonna happen. Sorry for that. Nope.
I so much.
Yeah, well, this is no. There's others that are much more kind of addicted already. We just stay with good old search and not waste our time with just another been there, done that kind of network. So I'm curious what's gonna happen, but for now I let others do that. So we're gonna focus on search. There has been, before we do that though, I mean, you mentioned the content calendar, because we have some really cool topics lined up for the next weeks and even months. So maybe it's a good moment that we share that we also going to be having a couple of guests in the upcoming episodes. Do you want to? Because I don't have the dates in my mind. Do you have them out of your head, or?
No, not really.
No, but I kind of. Okay, well, this is how where we are prepared, right? However, quick housekeeping between until Dominique finds the dates. The show notes, as always, are, here's the link as well, just on our website in the blog, all the recaps, especially links. We're going to have a ton of links for today. We're going to do a bit of a recap of December, but also a lot of things happened in the last 2 weeks. Google was quite busy, actually, releasing things, so I kind of just collected a whole bunch of them. So we can just quickly go through them. But and they were going to be kind of available in the blog as well. Yeah. So if you have any comments, points, and whatever in between, as always, we are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, I believe, YouTube, etc. So feel free to just leave the comments there. We're trying to monitor them, and we're trying to kind of get back in whenever we can. But other than that, everything else is going to be collected on the website in the show notes. So that said, so what are the dates now?
So I still haven't found the document, because I think it has been moved. But
Heidi, who is overseeing the content planning, shout out, my dear, apparently moved the document. So we blame you. That works.
I think so. I'm not sure.
We shall see. But the one thing that I know out of my head is that we're going to be having our very good friend, James Brockbank, actually joining us on air. And so he's running an agency in the UK called Digital Loft, and we are going to talk about mainly international, but also generally speaking, content campaigns. And we're going to try to pick his brain on, what we and he thinks are the differences, but not only the difference, but also what makes those campaigns really successful. Those guys have won a ton of awards last year for some really phenomenal things they've been doing. So I'm super excited for him to join us live. And if I'm not totally wrong, this is not next week, but the week after, right?
It should be next week, actually.
There we
it's
go.
Next week, exactly.
So bookmark that 26th of January. You're right.
That would
be at 4 German time. So James is going to join us for an hour. So that's going to be definitely quite exciting.
I think after that one, we have in the first week of February, it's the 2nd of February, we will start with having a quick recap, right? About an organic search update on January. And I know that we the week after have a social advertising special episode. That's the
I think Paul is joining us again, right?
Joining us, exactly. So he's super excited already and preparing some slides for us.
Yeah, there's going to be, for those that have, not for that, there's going to be some massive changes coming for iOS and like cookie policies and whatnot. So make sure to dial in. This is going to be very exciting. So we're going to be trying to collect a lot of cool stuff up until then. Yep. So I think that's good enough for a teaser, I would say. So next 3 episodes gonna be busy. Gonna be very busy. Yeah. So I think we're already down 10 minutes. We're not gonna talk about Clubhouse, so we're gonna talk about search. And I think to do so, I'm just gonna quickly switch over to another screen. There we go. With some really cool things that happened during the last, 1.5 months almost, I think. And I think one of the things that you see on a lot of companies' radar in organic or generally in search is an announcement that Google actually made already quite a while ago around like page experience and the page experience update, which is supposed to roll out in a couple of months' time. And I think part of that this entire discussion obviously is also, and we have been covering that, the Core Web Vitals update, which was also a huge topic. So I've been, and this was also the reason why we had to move that pretty short notice last week. So my apologies for that. There was some hiccups with the calendar and the different time zones. So I spoke at the SEJ Summit, so the Search Engine Journal Summit, kind of took place last week. Obviously, entirely virtual, but it was a relatively huge show. I think 1,300 attendees for a paid event. It was actually quite good. It was really strong lineup, so that might have been also the reason. And also, they of course had this kind of, let's say, first mover advantage, at least for 2021. So it was the first big show. Sadly, I was sharing a session together with Bartosz, who was actually coincidentally the guy who was running Only, so the link that I currently am sharing for the guide to the page experience, or to ultimate guide for page experience. So we kind of shared a stage, or virtual stage, and sadly there were massive issues with Hopin, so one of those event platforms, which is actually, it was normally a very, very good choice, but yeah, apparently they had some crazy issues. And so the entire 1.5 first hours were like really messed up. So our kind of talk then was delayed. So actually I could have done on air, but hey, who would have known? And then we did our Q&A the day after. But what's really interesting is that normally we're supposed to, so the talks were pre-recorded, which is in that regard was actually quite good. But then there were live Q&A sessions kind of straight after that. And so we had to move because they didn't want to, and that makes sense, like kind of change the entire schedule, right? So then we had to do the Q&A afterwards. And what's interesting is that on the day after, actually, and what we did that, and like, there was a lot of people just coming back, dialing in only for the Q&A around web performance and Core Web Vitals. So we did like an extended, I think, half an hour or something, with a ton of questions. So I think it's actually a huge topic on a lot of kind of SEOs agendas, and rightfully so, of course. That somewhat tie into this topic. So what's page experience in general. So they kind of only put together like a massive guide, right? So essentially 4 parts. So what is it? Why does it matter? I think this is straightforward and relatively obvious. I mean, when Google says something, everyone runs anyways. But what's more interesting is, I think, like signals and stuff that goes into it, how you can audit for like an experience, because it's somewhat a bit of a kind of abstract concept, right? And of course, like then strategies, resources, how to do better and whatnot. But it's a very, very thorough, and you can see it probably here on the right hand side with this tiny scroll bar. So it's a huge read. So yeah, it's certainly one that kind of takes a bit of time to go through, but I think it's good timing, and makes a lot of sense. It's picking up on obviously some of the parameters that Google is setting, as I said, with Web Vitals, with some of the stuff that you all should have done at some point by now. So safe browsing, HTTPS. I think that's somewhat check mark, but then there's of course also mobile friendliness and the entire discussion around mobile setups in general, as well as, and that's probably a bigger one, is interstitials or overlays, etc. So those things are kind of all part of page experience, if you so will. And one thing that really struck me, which I didn't realize that people kind of didn't know, is like, so when we talked about Core Web Vitals, Google made quite clear, and also in the documentation, that the current set, so the 3 metrics we are currently working against, like LCP, largest control paint, first input delay, FID, and then CLS, so the shift score. They are the 2020 metrics, and also the thresholds are the 2020 thresholds. So there's a high chance that this is going to change. So it's not like you do it now and then you're done and that's about it. It needs to be a constant process, and this is one thing that came up a lot of times last week. So I just thought that's worthwhile mentioning. But yeah, so this guide is really cool. So if this is, I think, no matter what you're working on in SEO in general, it's kind of a thing that you definitely should read, kind of understand what the impact is. Go into Core Web Vitals, obviously, if you need help with that and web performance in general. There is, feel free to reach out to us as well. There's also another link that happened a bit later, but I'm just kind of quickly gonna go over through this one because it ties in quite nicely. So that's kind of mid of January. So Smashing Magazine, for those that are not familiar with them, they do a lot of stuff around web performance and web technology and that stuff. So that's a really, really strong resource. And they do that every year. They do kind of release a performance optimization checklist, if you so will. So they released their 2021 edition, and you can download that as a PDF and whatnot. And it's again, it's a massive, as you can see, list here. But what I really like is, so it's structured very well, right? It's kind of, it's around planning, it's goal setting, it's environment. So because that's one of the things that I also oftentimes struggle with when I do talks. The problem is that you can do a lot of things, but it very, very, very much depends on kind of the status quo, the systems you're working with, right? And we see that a lot with audits. There's no one fits all solution, because obviously it's very much depending on, client CMSs, or is there a CDN in place or not? Like, what are the publishing processes even, right? So how to get images being published on the web, for example, right? So those things really. So it's really well structured, has a lot of different topics, some backend stuff as well, like etc. And then it's not only for people that know how all of that stuff works, but it's also kind of it gives a simple, I think, or as simple as possibly, well, as you can possibly do it, kind of an entrance to that very much kind of complex topic, with a lot of numbers and goal setting again, and tools and whatnot. So yeah, worthwhile to bookmark, and then potentially kind of deep dive whilst you're at with kind of the page experience stuff. That's maybe one kind of teaser. There is an event coming up, and I haven't actually opened this, but it's SEO Day, not the German one, but actually the Danish one. So SEO Day also happens, well, normally happens in person, but obviously this year it's again not possible. It's too early, obviously. So SEO Day in Denmark is going to be going virtual as well. So lineup is quite cool, I have to say. So Martin Split from Google is kind of doing the opening session, and then of course there's a whole bunch of highly respected colleagues from the northern markets, including my good friend Trond. So that's really cool to see. And I'm gonna do like the midday session at 12, and we are gonna talk about some of the stuff that we've been doing at the Peak Ace Lab. Some of you might have seen some of my talks earlier, 2020. I think Friends of Search was a premiere of like an entirely new deck, and so we're going to be redoing a whole lot of things. And there's a really I start working on the deck and some changes, and I retested some things. And the reason why I'm bringing it up now is that there is actually some interesting things happening with overlays and Google rendering cookie nodes and whatnot. So yeah, if you have time, you should definitely dial into this one. So mine is obviously going to be in English. So yeah, feel free.
Cool.
Right now you can still register.
Maybe you can share some highlights afterwards here.
Maybe I can do that. Yeah, absolutely. No, so yeah, it's gonna be quite. There's quite some interesting things happening. So that's the guide from Only, definitely worth checking out. Another thing, and I'm not the biggest fan. Yeah, there we go. Some overlays here. I'm not the biggest fan of like those roundups and what's happening next year kind of a post stuff. But this one, yeah. It's I don't know. It always feels a bit like the same, and then it's just predictions and blah blah. But there's one that I have to say I really liked. I think the reason is also that the lineup for those that oops, there we go. That was not so smart. No, I pressed the wrong accept button, I have to say. So now we need to reshare it. Whoops, there we go. Yeah. So I wanted to get rid of this privacy one and I pressed the wrong blue button. The reason is that the lineup is actually really cool. So there's a whole bunch of people in there that I think really know their stuff. So it's Lily Ray, Brittany Mueller, a whole bunch of Marie Haynes, Adam Bremer, etc. So there's like a really strong list of people there. So definitely worth checking out. I'm not going to go through this, but like if you want some inspiration, there's going to be a whole bunch of things such as and stuff that we've been talking about last year as well, right? So there is focus on users and search intent. So that, I mean, obviously is nothing really new, but I think something that's going to continue. Tracking analytics, retention, lifetime value. So more like high level topics. And I think this is like sometimes also quite helpful if you need some bigger picture inspiration, right? So this is why it's kind of on the list, and I think definitely worth checking out, even though it's already a couple of weeks old.
Cool.
There has been a whole bunch of things that Google has been releasing. I was actually surprised, and some really, and we're not talking even because we covered that already in the last show quickly. Google's core update. I mean, that also happened before Christmas, obviously, and some were saying that's not very fair and blah blah blah. So we're not even talking about that, but like also infrastructure changes, right? So, for example, early December marked an update for the Search Console API and Search Console overall. There were a ton of changes actually. Not only the API, which was in early December, but also there's that's still in German. My apologies for that. If you are into publishing, and that I think was one of the requests that, one of the things that people asked for, like really a lot, was separate reporting or kind of a dashboard, whatever, for Google News. There was nothing there, right? So it was all like very rudimentary and not really great. So yeah, they introduced like a new Google News performance dashboard actually, which is it's super helpful. And what came, I think straight before or straight after, I can't recall, is also the Discover report, right? So that also was something that wasn't really well, let's say, done beforehand, and there were no kind of separate statistics and data points available beforehand. So those two things also happened in the last couple of weeks. I mean, actually, news only I think a week ago or so. So Google's Search Console team has been really busy. There's also a change been done to the index coverage report. So that one, I mean, is obviously already a bit older. But I think one thing, and I think actually talked about that in one of the earlier episodes when we kind of touched on crawl budget and log files and some other things. There was one thing, or there actually some, but one was really annoying, and that was just labeled crawl anomaly, and no one really knew what was in there. And this was actually something also I kind of had a long chat with some of the Google people actually even earlier in 2020, and they were all saying, yeah, well, there's some certain reasons in the kind of the way the systems in the back communicate with each other. We can't give too much detail because they would just not be very helpful. So I think it's somewhat like infrastructure, or has been infrastructure related, etc. But so they kind of started being a bit more transparent, and kind of with those actually kind of really just not have this black box, like, okay, there's something wrong, we don't know what, or we don't want to tell you what. So yeah, there's been a couple of changes to that, and like one was the crawl anomaly, the other one was some blocking situation with robots text, where it got the wrong output. Soft 404s is a big topic, obviously, especially for pages or for domains with a lot of pages, and then some type of thinner content, for example. So kind of they changed the report is a bit more accurate. So a whole bunch of changes around output. And the other thing where I do not have actually a link for this, but what also just recently happened is that under settings, you finally also now have some more detailed information on crawling, actually. So that's really cool, because, well, before, and then, I mean, that's still true, you still need log files and whatnot, but there was been finally some more transparency in regards to what is Googlebot actually crawling, what kind of frequencies, which type of user agents, which types of crawlers in that regard actually is Google using for that. Is it kind of discovery, or is it just refreshing content? How does it correlate in, unique pages versus what is Google actually crawling? Is that kind of somewhat in line, etc., etc.? So this is really cool. I find it a bit confusing. So if you haven't seen it for whatever reason, I don't understand why it's under settings, actually. So you need to go to settings and then you find it, but like it's not in the left hand navigation. Might be a reason for it or not. I don't know, but yeah, super helpful, and another like great addition, I think, to that. And the other thing, which really made me laugh, because that's how it actually felt. So Gary said at some point, I think it was also early January 13th in this case, just press the button to send a large batch of messages to sites which have been opted into HTTP2 crawling. I got like this list all at once. And that looked a bit wild. I mean, there's no real action for you there in regards to to-dos. I mean, you can opt out, but there should, I would say, in like 99 out of 100 cases, there shouldn't be any reason for you to opt out, because obviously, if Google thinks that you're good in regards to being crawled with the new protocol, so with HTTP2 in this regard, that also, of course, gives the benefit of just faster transfer times, etc. So why would you not, right? And normally it shouldn't cause you any problems, because you're already running on HTTP2 anyways. And of course, if you're not, for whatever crazy reason, then, well, you probably wouldn't have gotten the message in the first place. So again, no to do for you. Don't be scared. I was just like laughing because it literally really tied into nicely. Just press the button, large batch. I was like, yeah, that was a really large batch. So so there seems they have been very, very busy, actually, with a whole lot of changes. Also, I think today they released a new podcast. So if you're not like dialed into that, there's it's called Search of the Record. I'm not sure if so the Google Developer Podcast. I don't know where it is. There we go. So just today. So I haven't dialed into it yet. I haven't seen it, but just, I think it's generally a recommendation from my end. There's a lot of stuff that's somewhat bits and pieces that are often really, really helpful. So John, Martin, and Gary, plus sometimes special guests in this case, Cherry, kind of they spilled the beans, you could say. Like, there was in-depth stuff around like crawling and other systems and subsystems and how they interact with each other. So yeah, if you have not listened to it, there's a couple of episodes there from last year as well. Not crazy many, but still a good chunk. So it's definitely worth following that.
Cool.
That as well. Yeah. All right. So what else? So that's, I think, from the Google front, I would say. There has been, so I said we're not going to talk about it, but it's not entirely true. There has been this core update. I don't want to talk about the core update per se, but what is really good. So Gabe, shout out to Glenn if you're listening, did a massive, actually it's 2 parts, blog post covering various different cases where he's trying to outline and show the complexity of what happened at the update and how some sites benefited, some didn't, and what he thinks were or are either way the reasons for either a loss or a recovery, and both ways. So it's again, it's kind of a monster post. I only have the second part here. The first one I think was between the days in December. We're going to link both of them. But yeah, so it's really interesting what kind of he came back with. Obviously, some topics that are somewhat expected, right? So it again, I mean, it's nothing new. That it kind of there were some topics around EAT and EAT scores. Then there was some stuff around just generally how those sites were set up, and then kind of actually when you were trying to use them, they did something entirely different. So it's definitely worth going through it case by case, because same story. There's no like one fits all solution. It's like really thoroughly comparing stuff. As you can see, it's a monster of a post.
Wow.
But if you have been kind of, and you see it here, right? So this goes back to what we had in the only post, right? So mobile first experience not there. So it ties in all quite nicely. And of course, only because they say, well, the kind of update is happening, or the page experience update is happening in May, doesn't mean that, of course, parts of that are somewhat already active or partially active in those updates already. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of cool info in those posts as well. So certainly worthwhile. And then there's one that I imagine that I'm sure you probably have enjoyed as well. So I thought that would be a good kind of little discussion to have. So there was a post that Fishkin published, I think, mid of January, so just a week ago. And he stated with a headline saying, well, inferred links will replace the link graph. And so maybe to give you a bit of context, what's an inferred link, you could probably also argue that it's like an indirect link, or you could say it's a mention, either way. But essentially, well, he is saying that those will actually replace kind of, let's say, real links, or the links that are part of the link graph, because, well, for a whole bunch of different reasons. First and foremost, have you had a chance to go through it?
I haven't seen that blog post, but I went through the new tool on Majestic, I think middle of December. I think they launched it mid of December. Then I took time to read some articles about it, of course, and tested it, and I felt directly in love. To be honest, it's pretty cool, because therefore we have a lot of discussions about exactly that kind of topic, right? So what about tier 1 links, and what about tier 2, 3, 4 links, and whatever, which kind of impact does it have? And I found it quite useful, to be honest, the tool. It took some time to really understand yeah, definitely. But it's definitely worth to check out, I think, for different kind of approaches. I think also for different kind of reasons, right? So whenever you want to compare your domain, or want to find networks of your competitors, maybe makes totally sense why you're filtering over there, but also searching for linked lists, but also checking for PBNs and everything around that. So I think it's super helpful, and very time efficient. That's the good part of it, I think.
Yeah, and I think you could also argue that just like a search on Twitter is just really bad, right? So the search product that Twitter has is actually not great. So I think also on top of that, this kind of meta layer, it makes total sense. But yeah. So what he's saying in the post, so his argument is that kind of those indirect links are actually better than real links. I think that's a very far stretch, and I think this is also well, as always, right? If you have a punchy headline and be controversial, that's not the worst thing in the world. So I would imagine that that's part of the entire strategy behind the post. But I think so. The points that he is making, obviously, is that there's just but that's obvious. There's more text on the web than links. It's just better. There's more context. There's more attribution in regards to, because it is part of the text. There's authenticity. That might all very much be true, but I think you could also counter argue that, saying, well, it's probably easier if I say this is a link and it has a no follow than it is a link that's a link. So I think that's not entirely true. I guess I think honestly it's a very strong positioning post, and he makes some fair points. However, I would probably still argue that, well, if you can convert a mention into a link, then right now that is certainly giving you more impact than just letting it sit as a text mention. But either way, it's a really interesting post on where he argues around why is one more accurate than the other, and etc. So worthwhile reading for sure. And I mean, he says somehow like, well, it's probably still worthwhile in some sectors. It may be the case that machine learning still prefer links to inferred by weighting, blah blah blah. I think what he's entirely missing in this piece is also that well, there is languages, English versus other languages, everything else where Google is just not really as strong as. So I think this is also something that's entirely missing in this contextual discussion. Where I do agree, though, is that I said, well, if I pay an SEO agency to get you like 50 high quality links on a retainer, and you don't pay a digital PR team to get you the mentions, then you're losing out. And I think this is true, but it's also like a very black and white statement. Again, I think it's not about one or the other. I think if you're doing SEO that way, then he's probably right, because, well, then you just haven't understood how online PR, digital PR in general actually is working, and what content in a variety of different ways can do for you, and then it should result not only in one or the other. And if you're just paying to get the one, then of course you're doing it wrong, right? So I think this is not an argument, but, well, I think the rest is still relatively far-fetched. Let's put it that way. In my mind, at least.
So as mentioned, I hadn't the chance to read that kind of post, but of course I will do that. Sounds interesting.
It's an interesting one. It's a very strong statement, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's entirely wrong, but it's taking a certain scenario, pay $5,000 for something and be done with it. I mean, this is quite clear, and this is SEO maybe 3, 4, 5 whatever years ago, right? So this is not digital PR, content marketing in a way that you should be doing, or campaigning that you should be doing, or spending your money on, right? However, if you turn around, so if you do campaigns properly, then it's gonna result in unlinked mentions. It's gonna result in indirect links. It's gonna be resulting in links to the piece, and it's gonna be resulting in links to the brand homepage either way, right? So, I mean, of course, there's then still the way. I think you have been saying that as well in the past, where you can then kind of start working with those journalists, maybe or maybe not, right? Because you're okay with the integration. So I think the one or the other is a very much kind of black and white scenario, which is, well,
but that's what we see for many or in many blog posts and discussions about that topic, right? Whenever it comes to digital PR, link building, and everything, like the whole bubble is always like, where does they come from? So which scenario are we talking about? And of course, when you compare that kind of scenario, like if you buying 50 links per month for, I don't know, 5,000 euros, or do it the other way, of course, then the other way seems to be better, but this is not the stage where we are. So
I mean, I guess some still are, right? And I think if it's coming from that direction, then I can understand the statement. However, as always, I would say it's not really applicable for everyone. Let's just put it that way. So I think that's just not fair to say, well, indirect links are the new links. Come on, this is just not like, this is not this is not the reality, I guess.
Yeah.
Another thing that I found also quite interesting is an article that Gary published actually end of December. It's actually also the last one of those that I kind of put in my list, at least, is around this whole announcement of passage indexing and passage ranking and the whole confusion around passages in general. And so where to start, where to end? I think what people don't understand, or at least that's how it looked like, is what Google is really planning on doing. And I think this is somewhat also tied to the fact that their announcement wasn't really done well. So there were a bunch of questions, and I can't actually recall all of them. But what happened is that essentially some people were saying, like, well, how is those passages and passage capabilities different to featured snippets, right? Because they have like a more prominent kind of appearance in the search results, and isn't that essentially all the same? And I think what's missing here is a bit of like the context of what they are doing. And Danny Sullivan then kind of clarified, well, at least put out a tweet. I'm not saying he clarified it entirely, but like put out a tweet saying, well, passage ranking isn't about display. So what it means is essentially it doesn't have to do anything with what you are seeing in a different way in the search result. I mean, that might be a different order of results, but not necessarily anyhow tied into the fact that it gets a more prominent kind of output or a way of representation in the search results, right? So it doesn't cause the snippets to kind of get longer, but it is about understanding what a page is about. And I think this is something where people struggle to kind of understand the concept. So what still is going to happen is Google is still crawling your site for the time being, and they're still like reading the entire, HTML markup, whatever, the entirety of the page. But what is the capability is supposed to do is to understand certain paragraphs and also apply weighting to paragraphs rather than the entire corpus, so the entire body of content or text, if you so will. So, and then of course, obviously also understand kind of its relation to other bits and pieces of content. So if you on that side, right? So if you think about it a bit more from a conceptual perspective, what it actually means is if you have a very long form content, then they will be able to digest single bits and pieces. And then for a site that potentially where like you have a lot of different stuff on one, where that site might have not been relevant for the query, now they'll be able to understand, so this is a certain passage, and that passage is highly relevant, even though the rest is potentially not. And if that passage is better than everything else, and also better than a lot of like the other sites in its entirety, then you get a weighted kind of score or boost on that passage, which will be added to the overall relevancy of the document of the site. And then if that's good enough, then it might move up or down either way, right? So I think that's the difference. That does not have anything to do. It does not have anything to do with like the representation, the visual output. So don't confuse those two things. It's a very different thing. And Barry tried to kind of cover a couple of things left, right, and center, and the illustration is bad. And this is true because they picked an example actually where the snippet is longer, as you can see here, if you can see my cursor. So certainly not ideal, and kind of admitted that as well. But so overall it's about the content and not how the content is being visually kind of represented within the search results. I think this is the kind of major confusion or the major difference there. So this is something that you should be aware of. And I think that can happen also a bit later. It has not been put live yet. So there were some speculations around like when they released the core update and all of those things. that it might have been put live, etc., etc. Google kind of said nope multiple times. So apparently that was not the case. Yeah. So, but I think honestly, kind of to finish this one off, I think this is one of the most I wouldn't say undervalued, but like underestimated things that I think are going to happen. I think this is much, much, much bigger than Core Web Vitals. This is probably much, much, much bigger than page experience, because actually understanding certain types of content within content on a page and give that different weightings and different like added plus or minus scores what turn the game significantly towards, well, all of a sudden it's not about long form content anymore, because relevancy gets even more important. So the stuff that we somewhat all, I wouldn't say gamed, but where we kind of made use of the fact that mass content to an extent still wins over shorter stuff. That, well, again, we don't know, but that might be something that's gonna change. I think on the other way around, you might be also now in a position to just be able to compete with a very kind of precise short answer, and all of this like footer text stuffing nonsense, or let's put it on the category page, whatever, might stop being that relevant. So I'm quite excited actually for it, because I think it's going in the right direction. However, I have the feeling that a lot of people just don't understand the impact that stuff is going to happen if it works well. I mean, we shall see, but I think there wouldn't be that long kind of heads up time if that's not going to have a severe impact, if you ask me. Yeah, so that's I think that's that for passage indexing or passage ranking, either way. Yeah, and I think we already covered 46 minutes of news from the last 6 weeks, so quite a bit. I think that's good enough. That's good enough for this week. Otherwise, we are at an hour again, and we try to kind of not do that. We reserve that for next week, I guess. Yeah. So I think, Dominique, do we have anything else that we missed? No, huh?
I don't think so. I mean, you do not want to talk about Clubhouse, so
no. Maybe next week.
So maybe one more thing I have in mind, because it's like super present at the moment. It's bit away from the organic search update, I would say, but about the Insta Reels we see at the moment, which can be, or I'm pretty looking forward what's going to happen there, since I think Instagram changed their interface slightly end of November or something around that, beginning of December. So, and now the Insta Reels becoming super, they are super prominent, of course. I think it's Instagram's answer to TikTok, obviously, because it's exactly the same format. They are like 15 to 30 second videos, I guess. So, and this is where we see at the moment a lot of increasing reach on Instagram organically. Especially in the field of fashion and beauty, of course. I mean, that's one of the most relevant verticals there anyways, I guess. But this is super interesting at the moment. So this is what we have a bit, or where we have our eyes on at the moment, to see what's going to happen there, because it's developing extremely fast. So yeah, this is something I just wanted to point out, that it's definitely worth to check out on that. I mean, it's like super short form content, as I mentioned, like 15 to 30 second videos. Basically exactly the same as you have on TikTok. So also possible to reuse your assets over there, and yeah, definitely worth to check out.
Nice. Yeah. Good shout. Cool. So since we do not have any other questions that kind of came in, I would say we close it for the week. Again, mark your calendars next week, 4 p.m. German time. we are back with the next episode. We're going to be having James Brockbank on the show, joining us to talk about international and extremely successful content campaigns. So that's going to be quite exciting. If you have already, questions or comments or whatever, we should maybe also ask him in advance. Just tweet us, send us your feedback. You can leave it there or on any of the other social channels. I think this is whatever you prefer. Also, very, very last kind of comment. PK is kind of somewhat back in almost in hypergrowth mode. That's probably not true, but we're growing strongly. So if you made it until now and you were somewhat interested in SEO, PPC content or whatever else, and just want to work at potentially one of the most exciting workplaces in Berlin, that's for sure. Just check out jobs, the job section on PK's or jobs.pa.ag. We would love to hear from you. I think that would be amazing. So we can start working with Dominique or Julia, who was on the show or whatever. Send us your CV, give us a shout. Happy to kind of walk you through what we have open. And by the way, it's not only German-speaking roles. So also we have a whole bunch of international roles open. English. I know we have Dutch, an opening for Dutch, and some others. So feel free to reach out. Let us know. Be happy to kind of chat with you along. That said, thank you very much for joining us, for dialing in, and we will be back next week.
Bye. Thanks for joining. Bye.